Mixing is all about the application of two central concepts, levels and space. So today I'm going to be going over exactly how you can apply these ideas to your lo-fi beats to make songs that sound like this. That's just a little preview of the song Elm Bank off my new EP Lavender that's dropping tomorrow, May 5th on all major streaming platforms. I'm super excited about this project. I really decided to experiment with some new sounds and sort of step out of this mold of like lo-fi to study to. So if you like this song, definitely go check it out. There's a link in the description to pre-save the whole EP, and if you're seeing this after May 5th, the link should bring you to a landing page to find it wherever you like to listen to music. But that's enough about me. Let's talk about how you can get a good, crisp, clear mix on your own lo-fi beats. Now, like I said, mixing is all about levels and space, so let me explain what I mean by each concept, and then we can get into exactly how I like to apply these ideas in my own production. When it comes to leveling, I'm really just talking about the relative volume of each element in your song. Essentially, your main goal here is to just make sure the right elements are standing out and nothing is too overbearing. It ultimately just comes down to training your ear, and the best way I can recommend to do that is just listening to other songs that have already found success to sort of identify what is like a desirable mix within that genre, right? That's sort of exactly what people are talking about when you hear people say using a reference track. You just refer to something that sounds the way you want it to and then try to match it with the elements in your own music. On the other hand, when it comes to space, I'm talking both about the physical space your sounds are in and also the space in the frequency spectrum. On the physical side, you can move sounds left and right through panning, and you can move sounds forward and backwards with effects like reverbs and delays, where something with more reverb will sound like it's farther away or farther back in the mix. And then in terms of the frequency spectrum, you just want to make sure that you have an even distribution of sounds across the entire range from really low to really high noises. You don't want a bunch of things piled on one frequency because it can get muddy. You don't want too few things spread out too far apart because then it can sound really thin. So essentially every element should be playing a role to fill a specific frequency and physical space within the track. And then you use leveling to decide which elements are the ones that the ear is more drawn to and which ones are just there to create the ambiance. So I'm laying all these ideas out at the beginning because I think the most important piece of advice I can give you on mixing is to do it as you make the track, right? So every time you add a new element to the song, you should be thinking about whether you want it to be forward and present in the mix or if you want it to sort of blend into the background. And you should be thinking about what gap in the mix you're trying to fill. It's a lot easier to get a good final mix if every step of the way you're thinking about the final mix. So all of that being said, mixing can get very technical very quickly. There's tons of different techniques you can use to sort of capitalize on these ideas. And I was initially really tempted to make like another 30-minute deep dive video on all the techniques I use in my own productions. But I actually thought that it might be more useful if I just stick to like a 30,000 foot overview with maybe a few technical examples and then sort of save the really technical, super specific nitty-gritty stuff for future videos. So definitely let me know in the comments if there's any like particular mixing techniques you want to see me cover in a future video, or if you have any questions or things you've been struggling with. I am making this video in response to a request I received in the comments before on a previous video, so really do let me know if there's something specific you want to see me cover, because all I'm trying to do is make videos that will help you along in your music making journey. So with all that being said, let's take a look at the 30,000 foot overview of how we can apply the concepts of levels and space to our own productions. So this is the project file for Elm. You can see it's really simple, and that was super intentional, but I think what's important to note here is that despite there being very few elements, I think it still sounds pretty full because each of these elements is playing a role in the mix. So the song starts off with just some, nature sounds, as is pretty classic in sleepy lo-fi, and then the piano coming in with slowly swelling in strummed guitar. So you can hear that the piano and the guitar, while they're kind of in similar frequency ranges, they have different timbres and they have different sort of length characteristics. So there's a fullness without it being too super wide. because I wanted to save the really full wide sound for the actual first drop. So what you'll see at the beginning is sort of one of the first mixing techniques that I used is these automations of the volume and filter on the strum guitar. So that already is creating dynamics and changing the leveling to switch up where the ear is drawn to. So it starts where the birds are sort of the central focus because, you know, they're basically the only thing playing. And then from the birds rises this nice gentle piano. So that grounds us into the key and into the song with a really quiet bit of the strum guitar happening. And then through the next two measures, the strum guitar sort of gets louder and now the ear is drawn there. So in the first four bars, there's already been 3 changes in where the ear is drawn using just the leveling. So then this other thing that I've got going on is the mix level of the filter through the strum guitar. What this filter is doing is just taking out some of the low end, which makes it sound a little bit thinner, a little bit more tinny, which I think allows the drop to be a little bit more impactful by creating some contrast. So all of those things sort of combined, and you've got this slowly evolving introduction without really like having each element kind of jump in your face and be like, hey, pay attention to me. You know, it's like they're just kind of appearing and passing the ball back and forth for who's driving the song. We got a nice transition sweep into the first drop where everything opens up and we've got a full frequency representation here. I think this is where mixes can start getting pretty muddy when you've got every element across the full frequency spectrum. If you're not really intentional with both your voicing and also your EQing, you can end up with a lot of overlapping frequencies that, while they might not be dissonant or fighting with one another, they definitely can get a little bit muddy. So let's quickly take a look at all of the melodic elements that we have in this section and talk about what their role is and what space they're in. This first new sort of main melodic element that came in is this lead part on the electric guitar. It's still pretty simple, but you'll hear that it's actually in a higher register than what the strum guitar is doing. So now we're creating a separation in the frequency range between the strum guitar and the lead guitar. Now all the way down on the lower extreme, we've got a bass tone. So this is gonna be probably the first thing that I show you a little bit of super simple technical detail. When the bass comes in, we don't want it to even come close to stepping on the other melodic elements that we have going on. So here I've just got an EQ cutting off even more of the high end. So you can hear it fills out, and now we're starting to get a full frequency representation, right? But there's nothing really too terribly interesting happening here. So that's when I sort of stepped out of my usual comfort zone in lo-fi and laid down a couple of vocal takes. Again, thinking about where I wanted this element to be in the mix, I have a high chop that is its own element. So I've sawed the low frequencies out of these high chops and then done something similar with the low chops. Now, the low chops aren't going to be as low as a bass, and we don't want them to fight with the bass. So I've actually taken the really low end out and some of the high end out. So now it's not fighting with the high vocal chops and it's not fighting with the bass parts anymore. So you can see how as I'm adding each element, I'm thinking, okay, where in the frequency spectrum are these going to be? And then how much attention do I want to draw to them? So I knew that I wanted the high chops to sit forward and at the top of the mix, and then these lower vocal parts to be sort of like a counter melody to that. Counterintuitively, you'll see that the faders are actually turned down on both of these mixer tracks. And that's because, like I said, sort of at the beginning of the video, you don't want anything to be overwhelming. What I've done here is by letting them have their own frequency space, rather than just needing to push them to be really loud. By letting them sit in the empty spaces in the mix, they can draw the attention that they need without sort of being this like super dominant element and being really, really loud. So I want to use this strum guitar to sort of demonstrate some of the more technical aspects of mixing, because like I said, it can get really complicated really quickly, but I want to touch on a couple techniques that I think can make a big difference in your production sort of right away without having to understand too many super complicated concepts. Real quick, let's just listen to what the strum guitar sounds like with all of the effects turned off. I just realized the piano was recorded into the guitar track. I had no idea. There's a fun little Easter egg for you when you hear this song when it comes out. Interesting. But anyway, you can at least hear in the guitar part that there's a ton of low frequencies that will end up fighting with the bass part. There's this high buzzing that sounds terrible because my signal chain was awful at some point. I probably had my phone like resting on the 1/4-inch cable, and it's just kind of dry, right? Like there's not a lot of dimension to it. It doesn't feel like it's in a chamber, and it doesn't feel like it's in the same place that the keyboard is, right? So this first technique that I think can immediately transform a lot of your sounds is called dynamic EQ. I hope that makes, that kind of was like a little bit jargony, but essentially like if a noise in a certain frequency range is too loud or too quiet, you can use dynamic EQ to only change that frequency and only in the cases where it's too loud or too quiet. You'll see that when the strum guitar is playing, this 5,000 hertz is going to be dipping down a little bit. So then next, we've seen a good amount of this so far, but it's just EQing, right? I've decided that I want the mids of this strum guitar, the low mids really, to be the central component of it. But you'll notice I didn't completely saw off everything but the mids. So now with our dynamic EQ and our static EQ, it's starting to clean up a little bit here. And then we bring in the big dogs. We've got the reverb. Valhalla Supermassive is another just amazing free plugin. The mix is, 50%. It's not super drenched, but you'll hear that it really adds like some nice atmosphere to the sound. So I've just got the filter from the intro on this effects chain and then the limiter acting as a compressor. I'm not going to dive too deep into compression right now. I think that's probably best saved for a future video. But to end off this little effects chain on the guitar, I've actually just got another instance of a static EQ, again taking the low ends out because sometimes the reverb can end up adding some new frequencies or amplifying certain frequencies based on the reverb. And yeah, altogether you end up going from this to this. So hopefully you can see why I say that it's best to mix as you go. Actually, let's just take a listen to what it sounds like with none of the effects on. I don't think I've ever done that actually with one of my songs before. It's really funny actually to listen to. But yeah, you can imagine like how much of a nightmare it would be to go back through everything and like adjust the relative volumes and adjust the EQs and compressions and reverbs. You're looking at basically like a whole new session just to get the song into the state that it was in when it was. Cannot recommend enough. Just mixing as you go. Apply the effects you think you're going to want. You can change your mind later, but to sort of give it its home as you're making it, it makes it a lot easier to build around it and make sure everything's blending together. Yeah, so sort of just a quick video today. I hope this was helpful. Again, I wanted to stick to that really high level overview, not get too bogged down in the details of the technicalities, but I would be really happy to make a more technical explanation of how to use some of these techniques with specific plugins and certain effects for your own lo-fi mixes. So if you did find this video helpful, please think about hitting that subscribe button, leave a like, and let me know in the comments what you want to see me do next. I am here to help you become a better music maker, and I really just want to make whatever videos you guys are interested in watching. So if you've got anything at all, any questions, any comments, any feedback, if you listen to the EP and you want to let me know what you thought, leave a comment. Let me know. I will be responding to every single one. And yeah, I think that's all I've got for you guys. So I'll see you back here next week. Peace.